So, welcome, lovely souls, to the Voice podcast and basically empowering health. And I have the wonderful guest, Jenny Lidster, with us today. And we are going to be talking or exploring the world of EDMR, hypnotherapy, menopause, unconscious, conscious trauma, and how these may well have an intrinsic relationship. And yeah, this journey is just going to be exploring these modualities. For me, I come from a somatic myofascial connective tissue, and it will be just most interesting to see how we can explore this topic, because it's really coming paramount and obvious that a lot of women going through the perimenopause and menopause are experiencing ADHD symptoms. So yeah, we're just going to literally explore this topic and see where we go from there. So welcome, Jenny. Thank you for joining me today.
Thank you for inviting me.
You are welcome. So Jenny, do you want to just give us a little snapshot of you and what got you into helping other people?
So I actually reached this place from having some real difficulties with my own mental health. And that kind of started particularly with the birth of my first child. Now I understand about how when we become parents, that can trigger our own childhood trauma. I didn't know that at the time.
No, me neither. Thanks for telling us that one.
Yeah. And I tried all kinds of things over the years. I had a lot of counseling. I did CBT, I did mindfulness-based CBT, I did a lot of things to help myself. And I'd come to the point where I felt that I could manage my anxiety, which was still there. It wasn't quite as debilitating as it had been at the beginning, but it was frankly exhausting to manage. It felt like I was taking a huge amount of energy to calm myself, to soothe myself, the thoughts, the worries, the anxieties. And I just reached the point where I thought, I've done all these things. I meditate every day. I've done all this work, and maybe I'm just an anxious person. This is who I am. And I kind of just got used to managing it. And then I reached a point where I think I just thought, I don't think I can do this for the rest of my life. It's so exhausting to just be like this every day, to wake every morning with that jolt of like something shooting through my system. And I happened to talk to a friend, and I said, I think I'm going to have to explore something else. It's time to look at this again. And she said, have you tried hypnotherapy? And I thought, no. I knew nothing about it. I think what I did know was it was about probably fears and phobias and stopping smoking. That's as far as it went for me. I really didn't know anything about it at all. But I was pretty desperate. And so I thought, I'm going to try something else. So she recommended me someone. And the person I went to see, the therapist I went to see, actually, like I now do, delivers hypnotherapy and EMDR in a combined sense in each session. And from the very first session of hypnotherapy, I felt differently than I ever had before. Any of the other sessions that I'd had. They'd been helpful. I'd learned about myself. I understood myself. I understood where my anxiety and the PTSD was coming from. I had all this fantastic understanding, but I wasn't able to actually let go of the emotions that were swirling inside. And from the very start, I could just tell this was a different kind of therapy. And so then when I'd finished, got to the end of that, the course of those sessions that I went for, I decided to train myself. I was at the time teaching mindfulness and meditation in schools and in workplaces. But I'd understood that for a lot of people, while those are really useful skills and modalities and techniques to have, for a lot of people, it's not enough. It's like trying to constantly wrestle that octopus into the string bag. And what I help people do, I think, is get out and calm the octopus. So it's not trying to escape that sling bag all the time. And so that's how I found my way to being a hypnotherapist and then an EMDR therapist.
Wow. No, well, thank you for sharing that, because you know, that's huge. And a lot of the time, us therapists have come into it because we've actually needed that healing ourselves. And what comes to me then, a little bit from our conversation that we had before this, always little gems happen before we hit that record button, was the fact that even though you're quite conscious of patterns, you can't quite break them. And it's delving deeper into the subconscious mind, which I believe plays out for 98% of our thoughts and our actions.
Yeah.
You know, if that's not got the coordinates that you want, and that's constantly firing at these patterns, these belief systems, a lack of self-worth, you're not good enough, or you're in a state of fight or flight, you can't. You have to be able to tap in to that subconscious, and the unconscious body is what I work with, is the somatics of where everything's held on a cellular level. It's connecting deep into that. And we were just starting to talk about how EDMR, how you use EDMR as a way of connecting into that may be different to how other people. Are you able to explain?
Yeah, of course.
Thank you.
So a lot of times EMDR is delivered when people go for sessions. Their practitioner will ask them to remember, describe various distressing, upsetting, traumatic events, whatever it is that they're remembering. Then they work on the least troubling event, you know, with the bilateral eye movements, and then they gradually work their way up to the most troubling events. But one of the issues with that, of course, is that's only working on those conscious memories, and there are so many unconscious memories that we have. Also, people can find that actually quite re-traumatizing, to be going over again something that's very traumatic or distressing. And so the way I deliver EMDR that's different is that when I have a client in front of me, they are experiencing something. It may be the emotion, it may be the body sensation, it could be an emotional, it could be a visual flashback, it could be a repeating thought. But for a lot of people, it is that either emotional, that body sensation. We then use that as the target for the eye movements, for that bilateral stimulation of the brain. And again, quite often, a lot of the time, I will get someone when they, for example, if they're feeling a sensation, they're like, sometimes they say it's just a block. I feel like there's, or they'll pat their chest and say, there's something here. And I'll say, give it a color, give it a shape, tell me how big it is. Once we've given it that symbol, that metaphor instead, when we do that eye movement, that bilateral stimulation of the brain on that target, that shape, that color, that symbol, their brain is able to reprocess, unravel a lot of traumas in one go that they don't even know what they are, because our brains are pattern matching machines. So in that moment, that feeling that they say is that block or that tightness, their mind goes so fast to all the things that made them feel like that. It's this, it's this, it's this, it's this. It's like reams and reams of things. And in that moment, they are then able to work on lots of traumas, and importantly, lots of unconscious traumas. So they haven't had to have that re-traumatizing effect, if you like, of going through the therapy. And that's why a lot of people then recommend their friends to come and see me, because a lot of people are worried about re-traumatizing or going back through things. They're shutting these things off for a reason. They're too upsetting, they're too overwhelming. And to find out that there's a way that they can deal with it in a much gentler way is something that understandably really appeals to people. And it's incredibly effective. And it's just astonishing how when I've had people come and see me, and they quite interestingly there's certain places we expect to carry trauma. You know, we understand that we get that tight chest, that feeling in the stomach, something in the head. There's a lot of things that are quite common. And then sometimes I'll get someone, and for them it'll appear in their shoulder, for example. It will keep that's where they'll feel, as we go through the movements, that's where they'll feel this sensation. And our client said to me, oh yeah, it makes sense that that's where it goes, because I've got an old injury there. She said, you know, I'm from decades ago. I was in my 20s. It's an old injury. It flares up every now and again, quite regularly. But in the sessions, it was really quite painful. And we'd done some EMDR, and she messaged me weeks later, probably about 6-8 weeks later, and she said, that pain has completely gone in my shoulder. And she said, I don't know what you did to me, actually. She said, but it's gone. She said, it wasn't an old injury. I thought it was a physical injury, but it was an emotion. I was emotionally holding the trauma there of 40 years ago.
Yeah.
And she said, it disappeared, and I didn't message you at first because it comes and goes. She said, but it's been gone so long, it's gone. And she was just blown away by that. And it happens time and time again with people where I see and I hear them release the pain, physical pain in their bodies as well. And it's the most incredible thing to be part of, and to see that mind body feedback, you know, I'm astonished. Even though
No.
time, it still amazes me.
No, that is amazing, and you're making me smile, and I'm nodding and myself as you're talking, because from my perspective, it's the somatics, and the relationship of the emotional and the physical are one of the same. And you know, my perspective and my belief is that, you know, through pain and disease, the body is trying to seek reconnection to us. It's actually, loneliness follows the same neural pathways as pain. So our body is often trying to reconnect with us. And the fact that you're talking there, and your work is getting people out of their heads and into their body, how they feel. So it's that feeling, the emotional brain, isn't it, that you're connecting, but from a visceral perspective, that takes it out of the questioning brain, doesn't it? It literally draws it to the wisdom that's within you, rather than trying to, you know, analyze things. And the analytical brain can quite quickly try and tell you a different story, so you can't connect to it, can't it? And you're bypassing that as you're doing your work. So I mean, that's fascinating.
And I regularly say to people that we can't outthink an emotional problem. And that's what we try and do. That's what we've been trained to do, to analyze, to wonder, to try and outthink it. And we can't outthink an emotional problem. We're using the wrong bit of our brain. It's not sitting in that prefrontal cortex. It's sitting at the back in the subconscious instead.
And we have really, society and quite some time has forgotten about the emotional intelligence. And we have come very into our heads that everything we need to know is outside of us. Whereas there's a huge amount of innate wisdom that's within us, but we have become so disconnected from our bodies, from our lifestyle, from being inside, sitting at screens, from not being outside in the cycles of nature. We have lost a lot of our grounding and connection to ourselves, haven't we? And so it's really important to establish that connection again. And your work, through people coming to you because of trauma, you're actually getting them to come back to their body.
Yeah, absolutely. Come back to themselves, and to find that answer within, to find that solution, that connection, to find their own way to healing, because everybody's is different, you know. And I never think that I know what someone's journey is, because everybody's is different, and it looks different. And we've been trained too much, I think, to press things down, to push on through. And that's not serving anyone.
No. Comes to a point where the body goes, no more.
Yeah,
absolutely no more. And I feel that actually, as we wanted to talk about menopause and perimenopause, and you know, actually that is a moment in our lives to address old unserving patterns of behavior that we've inherited from our mother and the mothers and mothers and mothers, and that can be trauma too, if we've experienced our trauma and also what we've inherited. But it's also, it's menopause I see is actually about us stepping up into our power. And what we need to do is look at all what blocks us from doing that, our wisdom center, which for me, everything comes right back to this magic bean, the pineal gland, which is sitting right in the center of what you're up to when you're doing your magical work, your amazing work. So I just would love to explore, and this, we don't need to have the answers here. It's just the understanding that, okay, looking at our own trauma, childhood trauma, narcissist relationships, pushing ourselves in high levels of cortisol that are running through our actions, but also through the subconscious, if there's hanging that trauma. Would you say that, trying to bring in a question to this rather than just a statement, but it's I mean, how would you see that with menopause in terms of for women and how they're, do you see many women coming to you with certain symptoms that relate to trauma?
Yeah, so I do, and quite often I get women, and it's the first time as they go into, they're in perimenopause a lot of the time, and it's the first time that things have started to be a problem for them. They feel like until that point they were managing, they were coping, everything was kind of okay. And it's absolutely fascinating to see what it is about that time of life. And from what I've looked into, it's that drop in estrogen that's having an effect. It's that change in hormones, because um, estrogen helps protect our brain from trauma, from PTSD, actually, because it's affecting, well, every cell in the body, estrogen, doesn't it?
Mm.
And because estrogen protects against the formation of PTSD, and actually that it gives us a more dynamic stress response, which is why women statistically are less likely to get PTSD than men. It means that when that estrogen drops, we lose that benefit. And what really interested me was that women who've experienced trauma have increased trauma-related flashback episodes when they're having a cycle still.
Okay.
They have more of those trauma-related flashback episodes in the phase of their cycle after ovulation, when their estrogen drops.
Wow.
So it's, and then women come to me during perimenopause, their hormones are everywhere. And yeah,
So this is the lead up to what we would call label PMT. Is that the sudden drop? That's when people's emotion, is that the right time of the cycle you're talking about?
it's the um it's the week, no, it's the week after ovulation.
Week after, right?
Yeah, it's the week
Okay.
after
So
ovulation
third,
when it
right?
drops. It's that luteal phase
Mm.
when estrogen is lowest.
Okay.
That because that initial stage they've got more testosterone, which is maybe having a certain protective effect as well on other impacts on the brain. And yeah, and so it's what's going on in our body at that time with the hormones, and how people have been managing until that point, and then something's going on for them.
Mm. So we are getting those signals at quite an early age. So with heavy periods or heavy mood swings and frustration, all these sort of, when we've come out of our joy, they're actually starting off early. It's not just perimenopause then. There might be smaller signs because we've got more estrogen. But as that drops more and more, it's like a veil seems to get released and go, well, we can't protect you from this anymore. You need to work through this.
Yeah, that's
Here you are.
exactly it. Yeah, it's like we've been covered in a fluffy cloud of estrogen that's been dampening everything and helping us cope, and now we don't have that anymore.
Wow. So it somehow has got us through being a maiden stage, the mother, and then all of a sudden, as you're starting to come out of the mother to come into what we call the wise state of being a woman, it's literally going, and here you are.
Yeah, yeah. And interestingly, at that time of life as well, where if women have had children, then their children need them less. So they are coming into themselves more. They have more time to explore, to ask who they are when they're not a
Yeah.
mother. Who are they now?
What's my purpose?
Yeah. Because mothering isn't just about our own biological children. A lot of people mother in many ways. And, you know, and when when we're having a cycle, we have more of those nurturing, softening, caring, dopamine, you know, damp estrogen, that nurturing hormone that makes us mother. And then we go through menopause and think, who am I? Sorry.
Because, you know, the other thing is that it's like society has really kind of made it, you're here to look pretty, to be sexually attractive. That's one of your purposes, to be all called out. Then you to have children. And then it kind of goes, well, you have no other purpose. You're just on the shelf now. And because you're not pretty, you're not going to bear children. Whereas actually, society might have downgraded all of that. But actually, this is when communities of hundreds of years ago would have recognized that this is when women come into their wise state. And actually, this is what I feel is when the pineal gland is starting to activate or trying to. But if it's calcified through stress, cortisol, just the fact that it's blocked, it swells up on the thalamus gland, which creates mood swings, temperature dysregulation, weight gain, all the signs that we call menopause. Whereas that's the little magic beans that's saying, no, this is, which regulates our whole of our hormones, is really trying to wake up within us. So it's just really fascinating how, like you say, that veil drops as the estrogen reduces. So we are carrying so much to now we have to work through it. And I mean, would you say with your clients, because it happens sometimes with me, is that you can actually see their person is carrying trauma that isn't actually theirs?
Yeah. But increasingly, quite interesting, people have a lot of the people I see are having more of an understanding of generational trauma, of epigenetics, of what that means. It used to be something that I never really heard people mention, and now increasingly I do have someone come and talk to me about that, about carrying the trauma from generations before. So, yeah.
It's been something that's been known, but not scientifically really seen yet. I think now that they're recognizing it epigenetically, trauma can carry through. And, you know, I've worked on somebody with the liver before, and betrayal. So emotions sit in certain organs for me, and anger, rage, betrayal sort of sit in the liver, and unprocessed. And the word betrayal came up, and it wasn't theirs. It was actually that person's mother's emotional state that had impacted her, of betrayal of men and what had happened to her, the mother, when she was in the womb. And it was like a direct shock to her solar plexus. And yeah, so how when we're actually in the womb as well, not just, it carries through. I mean, it'd be fascinating. Do you get any sort of regressions coming back into the womb with your work?
It's not something I deliberately target or lead towards. I let regressions happen spontaneously. So people can go back to very young, they can go back to being in the womb. And I had someone who in the womb had a conversation between her parents that she hadn't been wanted. And so that explained for her lack of belonging, her lack of not feeling part of something, the feeling unwanted, the feeling not good enough. It made sense to her. And
this was when her in the womb hearing a conversation. Wow.
That's what yeah.
How incredible. And you can't talk about that, can you? That can't be something you can go, oh, that's what happened.
Yeah,
It's your body is, yeah. Wow, it's incredible. I mean, there's so much we could talk about. It's incredible. What I would like to discuss, because it's certainly, I think, believe that you've recognized a lot, is that ADHD symptoms seem to really pick up and get exaggerated for women going through the menopause. Is that something that we could explore in terms of how your work can support that, and what you think is going on with the body and the mind and chemistry?
Yeah, so what I'm interested in is how a lot of ADHD symptoms can be similar to PTSD symptoms. So, and they're, because for a lot of people, PTSD isn't still fully understood. If someone doesn't have a PTSD diagnosis or understanding of it, the symptoms, there can be that crossover between with ADHD symptoms and PTSD symptoms, which I just find really, really fascinating. Because there's, so for someone with PTSD, when they have they're lost in a memory, it can seem like they're being inattentive because they're lost in a memory. Someone who has ADHD, they could be inattentive because they're struggling to maintain attention.
Mm.
And I just think it's fascinating it's probably almost impossible to actually unpick those things, but because so many people don't have that, maybe are looking at ADHD and recognizing those symptoms, maybe without an understanding that they might actually have PTSD, not ADHD.
Wow.
And again, there's that hormonal impact where ADHD symptoms become worse because of the shifting hormones, because of the drop in hormones and the drop in dopamine. And but I just, when I get a client coming to me, particularly a menopausal, perimenopausal woman, anyone really actually who says they have a diagnosis of ADHD or believes they might have it, I just share with them that there's a lot of crossover with PTSD symptoms and ADHD symptoms. I'm not saying they don't have it at all, because I'm not in the place to diagnose people. Just want to give them that information for them to explore that themselves. Because if they haven't considered that it might be PTSD playing out with their symptoms, then they're going about the wrong way, could be not considering something that will help them with the symptoms that with the restlessness, with the forgetfulness, with the brain fog, with the inattention, with the hypervigilance, with so many things like that they might not have considered it, that it could be PTSD.
Yeah, and they could get wrongfully put on medication, which again suppresses this. And having going on HRT could create issues, isn't it? Because it's still trying to mask an inherent stressor that's going on in the body that's always there.
And for some people, they choose that medication still, whether it's the increased estrogen because the anxiety is overwhelming and they need to function, they need to day-to-day life, and it feels debilitating. So understandably they reach for that thing, but it's not getting to the core of it. It's still masking it.
It's still masking, yeah. And that's the thing, really, because because I was reading into like estrogen and the dopamine and cortisol relationship, and how estrogen affects cortisol, so it actually reduces it or increases it actually, and cortisol can reduce estrogen, and it just has this back and forth kind of relationship. Whereas actually, if you have too much estrogen in your system, you can spike your cortisol, which is encouraging your fight-flight system. And then a lot to do with getting rid of too much estrogen comes into the liver. So that uses cholesterol to get rid of the estrogen produces cholesterol. So a lot of people later on in menopause might be seen they've got high cholesterol. What they've actually got is an issue with their estrogen. And estrogen creates later on in life breast cancer if you've got too much of it. So it's really, for me, everything's about looking at those signs early. And the fact that you say it happens when we're still in our cycle. If we're too heavy, if we've got huge mood swings, there's something saying something's not right here to address.
Yeah. And there, there are several studies now that show that women who have experienced trauma have a harder time of their menopause and PTSD symptoms when they go through menopause. So these things are just they're all bound up together.
Yeah. I mean, so yeah, I mean, naturally it would be, okay, what we can advise people. So I think maybe it's the symptoms. What is it that's actually showing up for you? I mean, the first thing that you came in to talk about was actually once I gave birth, having children yourself brings back that trauma, that childhood trauma. They're like little mirrors, aren't they? Coming back and something to deal with. And it's I guess it's knowing and being conscious of what's happening is when we can break those patterns, isn't it?
And I thought I had postnatal depression. So, now when I see, when, people say to me, well, it was, some recognize it was the advent of having children, but it's easy to think that it's the stress, it's the change, it's the juggling the extra plates, and that's why their mood was low. Maybe it wasn't postnatal depression, maybe it was a resurgence of trauma, but we're not encouraged to think of it that way. We're told it's something else.
The balance and imbalance of hormones, or because anxiety is quite high, isn't it, after postnatal? That can go up quite. Yeah. So it's a lot to be explored here, isn't there, really? And I think everybody's story is different. Everyone has a different way and a different approach. But I would say, I think it's really acknowledging that these symptoms aren't to be ignored, to be pushed through.
Yeah. And they don't, and yeah, exactly, not to be pushed through, and not to suffer either. It's not something that we just have to put up with now because we've reached a certain age, or we feel like there's so many plates spinning, we just have to cope. It's knowing that there is something that we can do. There's lots of things we can try until we find what works for us. Because, like you said, everybody's journey, everybody's answer is different, and it's finding what works for each of us as individuals.
Yeah, and one size doesn't fit all, does it? So, for instance, you combine EDMR and hypnotherapy, and it's bringing in a different mix of different modalities to help you explore. And I think the key is actually if for instance, if people weren't necessarily looking to speak with you, I mean, in terms of, because they're not in your location, it's actually sort of what questions would you suggest for people to ask if they're looking to speak to an EDMR or a hypnotherapist, and to really engage that it's about empowering them in their health rather than being kind of dependent on that therapist, because that's not health empowerment, is it? So that's what we talked about before.
So I think hypnotherapy is still an unregulated industry. So I think, first of all, it would be making sure that your therapist is really well qualified, and they haven't just done a weekend course online somewhere, but they've been trained well, like a 9-month in-person diploma, that they've seen case studies, that there's been a reading list, that they really understand. Obviously, as well, the next thing would be that they are trauma informed, which would normally be another add-on. And there are a lot of EMDR therapists will deliver it the way I described earlier, where they go through those events. So just ask questions, ask how do sessions run, how do you deliver EMDR, what would a session look like? any of those sorts of things. And you know, talking, obviously reviews are great when we look online, but I think when we read someone's website, we can get a feel of that person, which is so important. Because actually they can be a fantastic therapist, but if they're not someone that we connect or gel with, it's just not going to work for us. So I think trusting our gut, trusting our own intuition, that when we read about that person, we get a feel for them, and we think, yeah, this is someone that I want to reach out to the next step and start to explore it, or just think, yeah, I think they're not the right fit for me. Because I think that's so important, that connection between between a therapist and a client.
Yeah, I love it that you literally are bringing people right back to their body again. If you want to make a decision, get into your body. What does it tell you? What feels right? What feels wrong? And this is the work that I do, is all about getting out of the head, isn't it, and into the body, because that's where the truth really sits. And yeah, that's perfect. But also, like you say, listening, and this is why I've created the Voice podcast, is because it's about actually being able to hear someone's voice, is actually whether you can discern whether they're speaking of authenticity, with integrity. You can, if you just allow yourself to listen rather than just seeing all the white noise, you can actually tune into your heart and go, does this feel right to me? So yeah, that it's really important to use all those multiple senses that we have, isn't it?
Yeah, and learning to trust ourselves to make that decision, which I know some people find really, really difficult to do. And but it comes with practice, where we learn to trust ourselves, and to know that actually we make the best decision we can at the time. And sometimes we don't get it right, and that's okay, because we're human.
God, you just literally just shouting out at me there. It's like trust and self-compassion, and us. I don't want to be too generalistic, but I can only speak from a woman, and from my experience within clinic, is that actually when your head's all over the bloody place, it is hard to trust. You've got procrastination going on, and or you just become too overwhelmed that you don't know what to do, but nothing's actually happened, which is, it could be ADHD, PTSD, and but giving yourself such a sodding hard time when you're doing it as well, it's something I have to really check in with myself, and not give me that self-sabotage story. So yeah.
That self-doubt, that lack of confidence, that makes it so hard for us to learn to trust ourselves. And then when we peel through those layers and work on where that came from, because that's old stuff. A baby isn't born not trusting itself and doubting itself. And so we've learned that over the years, and so we can unlearn it.
Yeah, and that just feels amazing, just hearing those words. That just gives hope, Jenny. So thank you for that, because people can really think that they're stuck in this situation and there's no way out.
Absolutely. And I so often, someone says to me, I've always been an anxious person, and so I just gently say, you weren't born anxious. Things happened over the years that have got you to this point, but you didn't start out like that. So we can help you not feel like that.
I can imagine that's quite an aha moment for some people, and go, God, yeah, I am not that label.
Yeah.
I've attached myself to that label, and I've just continued that pattern because that's what I believe I am now, but actually I'm not. Yeah. Incredible.
So many labels we get given over years by all those external people, and we can pick the ones we want to keep, the good ones where we're confident and bold and brave and curious, and we can just let the other ones go. But we have to see them to realize that we're holding them. We can be carrying all this stuff without even realizing. We think it's our own. It has become our voice, although it was someone else's originally. And then when we work out how we can just let that go, just put that down, leave it there. I don't need it anymore.
Yeah.
We're the ones we want to.
Yeah, I think I say, like, your choice is your power and your awareness is your superpower. And so when you can make conscious choices that come from awareness, you're flying. And it is literally calling out and seeing that those BS systems, those belief systems, those patterns that aren't really your truth. But it's being able to break that pattern, isn't it? That doesn't have that mental thought, the emotional reaction, which then makes you think it's your truth. You're actually trying to break that whole neural pathway and create new ones to go, no, this is actually what I want. This is what I desire. This is my truth.
Yeah. And that awareness, that clarity, when we actually see something with that distance, so we see it a bit more dispassionately, that is exactly that point where we don't go into that reactive phase and that cycle starts. We can go, oh, well, look at that. That's not a great feeling. That's interesting. Why am I feeling like that about that thing that person said? But that awareness is so key. But so often we have to let go of a lot of emotion to be able to have that awareness, because when we're in that maelstrom of emotion, we cannot do that thinking straight, because our brains are just flooded with that cortisol running in, and our prefrontal cortex has gone offline and there's no thinking to be had.
No, I've had moments where I like, because my journey is like self-sabotage to self-love, still learning, still there, not completely there. But I just remember like once just being on the floor and in the bathroom, just bawling my eyes out, and just in that complete heavy of self-sabotage, that like you're just literally taking a lead weight, just right down into your solar plexus, and you just, constantly just giving yourself that beration, basically. And I remember just going like an SOS flare, going, I choose love, I choose joy, I choose peace. I'm worthy of love, which can often be a blocker for people, worthy of joy, worthy of peace, and I am love, I am joy and peace. And I kept repeating that to myself, going, I don't want this anymore. And within 5 minutes, I was up and I was like, what the hell was that? It was like somehow by just going, I'm not continuing this pattern anymore. I don't know how I'm going to get to the other, but I'm choosing that. That's my choice. And it changed. It's like, what the hell just happened?
Amazing though.
Yeah. So, well, I think we could talk about this for quite some time, because it's very powerful. And the passion that you have behind this, Jenny, I can really see that. And I think when you've been through things, experience, you equally don't want other people to experience it either. And your passion and your compassion and love that comes from that, really, I can see that. So thank you. I think we'll need to have another conversation at some point. But for those that live locally, or do you do online as well, or you mostly in person?
I do whatever suits people. If they're near, they often choose to come to see me if they can, but I see people who have no chance of getting to me. I had a client in Ecuador. There's no way she was coming to see me
Wow.
in person.
Well, in that case, because I was wrongfully assuming that people come to you personally, just one-to-one, that it's mentioned about this online, but the fact that I mean, there's only so many people you can see, but the fact that you're online as well just opens that up so much more. So how do people get to know and find you?
So they could contact me via my website, which is jennylidsterhypno.co.uk, or they could send me a message, send me a mobile text.
Okay.
So shall we drop details at the
Oh yeah, what I'll do is I'll put a link in, but so if they look at Jenny Hypno, did you say .co.uk?
jennylidsterhypno.co.uk.
jennylidster.hypno.co.uk. If they look on that, they can see you, they can see your contact information, your social media. I'll also post you on the comments under this podcast, and I will get you on the Infinity Health Hub as well, so people can see from that perspective too. So thank you. I mean, is there anything else that you would like to share before we finish?
I think I would just encourage everyone to hold themselves with that kindness and gentleness and grace and curiosity about who we are and what's playing out for us, the way we feel, and to know that I think there really is always a way forward and a solution. And even when you feel really, really stuck, there is somebody out there who's experienced what you're experiencing. So none of us are alone in how we feel. And you know, what you're feeling is not weird or different or abnormal. And there is help out there for you. So yeah, that's what I'd just encourage people to reach out.
No, that's perfect. And I think the words there that it's okay not to be okay, that it's normal, just releases that stigma and shame that can really keep people hidden in their pain and their trauma. So thank you. And I think as we're recording is actually suicide prevention awareness, isn't it, today? So hopefully, even though we've talking about menopause, PTSD and ADHD, this goes out to all people that are struggling mentally. So, well, it's been a pleasure. I'm definitely going to get you back, if that's all right, if you'll come back.
Always. I can always talk about these things because I find them fascinating. People, our brains, how we heal, how we move on. Amazing.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me. It's been
Oh, it's a pleasure. Thank you. And thank you for those that are listening. Take care.